She was on her knees, scrubbing the marble floor, when he walked in. He looked at her the way powerful men look at things they don't value. And then his phone rang. And every single thing he thought he knew shattered. The floor was cold. Not just cold the way marble gets in the morning, cold the way a place feels when no warmth has ever really lived there. Elena moved the mop in slow, quiet circles, her eyes down, her shoulders slightly bent. She had learned in the 3 weeks she had worked inside the Shin mansion that the best way to survive in a place like this was to be invisible. Don't make noise. Don't ask questions. Don't look up when the expensive shoes click past you. She had gotten very good at all three. The Shin mansion sat at the top of a hill on the edge of Seoul, wrapped in glass and steel and silence. From the outside, it looked like a building that belonged in an architecture magazine. From the inside, it felt like a place that had been designed to remind you, at every turn, of exactly how little you were. Elena was 25 years old. She had a degree in nursing that she couldn't use because the hospital where she had been training had shut down. She had a sick mother in a small apartment in Incheon and a stack of unpaid bills that had been growing for 8 months. She had taken the housekeeping job because it was the only job that paid immediately cash, every Friday, no waiting. She was not ashamed of it, but she was tired. She wrung the mop over the bucket and moved down the long hallway toward the east wing, the part of the house she had been told, very clearly on her first day, do not enter unless specifically instructed. She had never gone in there. Until this morning, when Mrs. Park, the head housekeeper, had stopped her in the kitchen and pressed a key card into her palm. Mr. Shin's study. The cleaning crew is short today. You go. Elena had looked at the key card and then at Mrs. Park. Are you sure? I was told. I know what you were told, Mrs. Park had said, already walking away. Just clean it and come out. Don't touch anything on the desk. So here she was. She swiped the card. The door opened with a soft click. The study was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A desk the size of a small boat. And on one side, a glass wall that looked out over all of Seoul like it owned it. Elena stood in the doorway for a moment, just looking. Then she stepped inside and got to work. She dusted the shelves carefully. She wiped down the side tables. She vacuumed the rug. She did not touch the desk. She was almost done when she noticed something on the floor beside the leather chair, a small frame, face down, like it had fallen. She picked it up. It was a photograph of a little girl, maybe 5 years old, laughing at something outside the frame. Her eyes were bright. There was a gap between her front teeth. Elena looked at it for a moment, something soft moving through her chest. She set it gently on the side table, face up, and went back to cleaning. She was still in the room when he walked in. She heard the door before she saw him. The sound of it, not a knock, just the card, the click, the push, carried a kind of certainty that said, I do not need to announce myself anywhere. She turned around. And there he was. Shin Jiwoo, 35 years old. 6 feet of controlled, precise, expensive, black suit. White shirt, no tie. Hair slightly longer than business standard, pushed back from a face that looked like it had been designed to be taken seriously. Sharp jaw. Dark eyes that swept the room in under a second and landed, immediately, on her. Elena had seen photographs of him, of course. Everyone in Seoul had. He was the kind of man who ended up in photographs whether he wanted to or not. But photographs did not prepare you for the actual weight of how he looked at you. Who are you? His voice was low and flat, not loud. Men like him didn't need to be loud. Elena, she said. I'm part of the cleaning staff. Mrs. Park sent me. I know who Mrs. Park is. His eyes moved around the room. Cataloging. Checking. Why is that here? He was looking at the photograph on the side table. Elena blinked. It was on the floor. I picked it up. Something shifted in his face. Not softened. The opposite. His jaw tightened. I didn't ask you to touch anything. I know. But it was on the floor, and I thought. You thought. He said it like the idea itself was the problem. You're the cleaning staff. You don't think in here. You clean and you leave. Elena held his gaze for 1 second longer than she probably should have. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say to that. She picked up her bucket and her supplies, and she walked toward the door. Stop. She stopped. There was a watch on this desk this morning. She turned slowly. I'm sorry. A watch. He walked to the desk, opened the drawer, checked it. His eyes came back to her. It's not here. Elena felt the understanding of what was happening arrive in her chest like cold water. I didn't touch the desk, she said. You can check. I am checking. And it's not here. His voice hadn't changed in volume or speed, but something in it had hardened into something else. You're the only person who has been in this room today. I didn't take it. Then where is it? She opened her mouth, closed it. She did not know where it was. And she understood, with sudden, exhausting clarity, that her not knowing was going to look exactly like guilt to a man who had already decided. Mrs. Park appeared in the doorway 2 minutes later, out of breath, key card still in hand. And behind her, 2 of Shin Jiwoo's security staff. Elena stood in the middle of the study and kept her hands very still and told herself to breathe. She could feel them all looking at her. She could feel the story that was already being written about her, the poor girl, the maid, the one who saw an opportunity and took it. She didn't defend herself, because she had learned a long time ago that defense without evidence is just noise. And noise, in a room like this, only made you look more guilty. So she stood there. And she waited. What no one in that room knew, what no one in that mansion knew, was who Elena actually was. Her full name was Elena Reyes. She had been born in the Philippines and raised in Korea by a mother who had worked double shifts in a garment factory for 20 years to make sure her daughter went to school. Not just school, good school. Elena had graduated near the top of her nursing class. She had spent 2 years doing volunteer work at an underfunded children's clinic in Incheon, using her own money she barely had, to buy medications for patients the clinic couldn't afford to treat. The hospital had shut down because of a funding scandal that had nothing to do with Elena and everything to do with the men who ran it. She had lost her job. She had lost the clinic. She had filed the paperwork to restart her certification at a new hospital, but that process took time and money she was running out of. So she cleaned houses. She did it quietly, without complaint, without telling anyone who she was or what she could do, because she had learned that people don't like it when you seem like more than what they've put you in. She sent half of everything she earned to her mother. She kept the other half for rent, food, and the certification fees. She did not steal. She had never stolen anything in her life. Back in the study, Shin Jiwoo's head of security, a broad-shouldered man named Director Kwon, was pulling up the camera feed on a tablet. Jiwoo stood with his arms crossed, watching. Elena watched too. The footage was clear. You could see her enter the room. You could see her moving through it, cleaning. You could see her pick up the photograph and set it on the table. You could see, very clearly, that she never once went near the desk. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Director Kwon cleared his throat.
Sir.
The watch. He zoomed in on a corner of the frame.
There.
It's behind the monitor. It must have slid back. Jiwoo's eyes moved to the desk. He leaned forward. He picked up the watch. Silence. Elena did not say, I told you so. She did not say anything. She picked up her bucket and walked to the door. Wait. She stopped again.
Turned.
Jiwoo was looking at her. Something in his expression had changed, not dramatically, not with visible shame, but there was a shift. Subtle. Like a wall that hadn't fallen but had developed a small crack.
I was wrong, he said.
The words came out simply, with no performance around them, like a man who corrected mistakes the same way he made decisions, quickly and without ceremony. Elena looked at him for a moment. Yes, she said. You were. And she walked out. She didn't tell anyone what had happened. Mrs. Park asked her about it in the kitchen afterward, her eyes careful and curious. What did he say? He apologized, Elena said, filling her water bottle at the sink. And I accepted. That's all. Mrs. Park studied her. Most people don't talk back to Mr. Shin. I didn't talk back. I just answered. She capped the bottle and went back to work. Shin Jiwoo had not always been like this. That was the thing people who only knew him from headlines didn't understand. At 20, He had been the second son of a man who ran one of Seoul's most feared criminal organizations, not the kind that got written about in newspapers, the kind that existed in the space between law and power, arranging things, settling things, making problems go away for the right people. He had been expected to follow his brother into that world. He had followed for a while. And then, when he was 27, two things had happened in the same year. His father had died, and his daughter had been born. Her name was Suji. She was the reason the photograph sat on the floor. Sometimes he moved it when the memory got too sharp, put it face down, and then came back later and put it face up again because he couldn't stand leaving it that way. Suji had died at age 6 of a condition that 3 different hospitals had told him was untreatable. Jiwoo had spent 2 years and an amount of money that would make most people's heads spin trying to find a doctor who disagreed. He had not found one in time. After that, he had made a decision. He had taken every piece of his father's criminal empire and, over the course of 5 years, systematically dismantled the illegal parts, restructured what remained, invested in technology and development, and built a legitimate business group that now employed 30,000 people. He had never done it for press coverage. He had never announced it as a transformation. He had just done it because Suji, in the few years she had been alive, had looked at him with a kind of pure and uncomplicated trust that no one else had ever given him. And he had decided that he wanted to deserve it, retroactively if necessary, even though she wasn't there to see it. He didn't talk about this. He didn't talk about much. The coldness people felt around him wasn't cruelty. It was a man who had chosen to carry his grief in silence rather than let it make him sentimental. But the crack that Elena had left in the wall, that small, unexpected yes, you were, stayed with him longer than he expected. He asked Mrs. Park about her the next day. The new one, Elena. Mrs. Park looked up from her clipboard. Yes. How long has she been here? 3 weeks. Before this. Mrs. Park hesitated, just barely. Hospital work, I believe. She didn't go into detail. Jiwoo nodded. That was all. He went back to his phone. But that evening, he had Director Kwon pull her file. The file came back more interesting than expected. Top nursing graduate. 2 years at a children's clinic in Incheon, volunteer basis, funded from her own salary. The clinic's closure had been the result of misappropriated government funding and a director who had since been indicted. Elena had filed a formal complaint about the clinic's closure before any of the investigations began. She had been the first person to flag it. Jiwoo read the file twice. He set it down. He picked up the photograph of Suji and looked at it for a long time. 3 days after the watch incident, Elena was cleaning the second-floor corridor when she heard it.
Crying.
Soft, slightly muffled, the kind of sound someone makes when they're trying not to be heard. She stopped. It was coming from the room at the end of the hall, a room that was always closed, that she had been told was a storage room, that she had never gone near. She stood in the hallway and listened. The sound stopped, then started again. She walked to the door and knocked lightly. No response. She knocked again. I'm not coming to bother you, she said, quietly through the door. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Silence. Then the door opened 3 inches. A pair of eyes looked up at her. Brown, young, red-rimmed from crying. A girl, maybe 12 or 13, wearing an oversized sweater, her dark hair pulled back messily. Who are you? The girl said. Elena. I'm part of the cleaning staff.
She paused.
Are you all right? The girl stared at her. You're the one who talked back to Uncle Jiwoo. Elena blinked. Word travels fast in this house. Something flickered in the girl's expression. Almost a smile. I'm Hannah, she said. I live here. Do you want me to get someone for you, Hannah? Mrs. Park or...
No.
Hannah's voice went flat. There's no one to get. Elena studied the girl's face. The red eyes. The set of her jaw. Too old for her age. Too used to handling things alone. Okay, Elena said. Is it all right if I sit here for a minute? I've been on my feet since 6. Hannah looked at her for a long moment. Then she opened the door, all the way. The room wasn't a storage room. It was a sitting room, small and slightly dusty, with a window that faced the garden. On the floor by the window were several notebooks, open to pages covered in drawings. Careful, detailed drawings of flowers and buildings and faces. "These are beautiful," Elena said, genuinely. Hannah sat cross-legged on the floor and shrugged with one shoulder. "Uncle Jiwoo doesn't really look at them." "Does he know you draw?" "He knows." She picked up a pencil and turned it in her fingers. "He just doesn't. He doesn't really see things like this. He sees problems and solutions. He doesn't see in-between things." Elena sat on the small sofa. "What happened to your parents, if you don't mind me asking?" Hannah's pencil stopped moving. "My mom died when I was 3. My dad, Uncle Jiwoo's brother, he's in Japan. He sends money. He doesn't send himself. So you've been living here for 2 years." Hannah started drawing again. "It's fine. Uncle Jiwoo makes sure I have everything I need. He's just not." She searched for the word. "Present. Even when he's in the room, he's not really there." Elena was quiet for a moment. "What made you cry today?" she asked gently. Hannah's pencil slowed. "School called. There's a parent event next week. Fathers and daughters thing. Arts showcase." She said it without drama, like she was reading from a list. "I asked Uncle Jiwoo if he could come. He said he'd check his schedule. Maybe he'll come." "He said that last time," Hannah said. "And the time before." The room was quiet. Outside the window, the garden was beginning to go golden in the late afternoon light. Elena picked up one of Hannah's notebooks carefully and looked at the drawings inside. They really were extraordinary. A row of apartment buildings that somehow looked tender. A cat sleeping in a window frame. A woman's hands around a cup of something warm. "Show me how you do the shading," Elena said. Hannah looked up, surprised. "On the buildings? How do you get that depth?" And for the next 40 minutes, while the light changed in the garden, Hannah showed her. Elena didn't mention Hannah to anyone. She didn't bring up the conversation. But the next afternoon, she came back to the small sitting room with a container of homemade arroz caldo, rice porridge, her mother's recipe, the thing she made when someone needed comfort food, and knocked on the door. Hannah opened it immediately. She looked at the container. "What is that?" "Arroz caldo. Rice porridge. It's Filipino. My mother made it for me every time I had a hard day." Hannah looked at it, then at Elena. "I haven't had anyone cook for me in a long time," she said. Not with pity, just as a fact. "Well," Elena said, "you have now." Jiwoo saw them through the garden window. He hadn't meant to. He had been on the phone, walking the second-floor corridor toward his study, when he glanced down at the garden below. Elena and Hannah were sitting on the stone bench by the old fountain, the one that hadn't been turned on since Suji died. Hannah was showing Elena something in one of her notebooks, pointing at a drawing, and Elena was leaning in to look, her head tilted with genuine interest. And Hannah was laughing. Jiwoo hadn't heard that sound in, he thought about it, months. More than months. He stood at the window and watched for a moment, his phone still in his hand, mid-conversation, until the voice on the other end said, "Sir?" And he made himself turn away. That evening, he came to find Elena. She was in the kitchen after hours, washing her own thermos at the sink before heading out for the night. The rest of the staff had already left. He walked in and she turned and, to her credit, did not look startled. "Mr. Shin, how long have you been talking to Hannah?" Elena set the thermos on the counter. "About a week. She didn't mention it to me." "She wouldn't," Elena said simply. He studied her. "Why not?" Elena picked up the thermos and thought about how to say the next thing. "Because she's learned not to bring you things she thinks you won't prioritize." She said it carefully, without cruelty. "That's not a criticism of you. That's just what children learn when they need to protect themselves." Jiwoo didn't respond immediately. Elena zipped her bag and lifted it onto her shoulder. She walked toward the door, paused. "She's showing her artwork at school on Thursday. Fathers and daughters event." She kept her voice neutral. "She didn't ask me to tell you that." "Then why are you telling me?" She met his eyes. "Because she's going to remember it either way," she said. "Whether you're there or not." She walked out. He stood in the empty kitchen for a long time after she left. The call came on a Wednesday morning. Elena was in the East Corridor when her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. She almost didn't answer it. She had a rule about her phone during work hours. but she glanced at the screen and saw the number and felt her stomach drop. It was the ICU nurse from Incheon General. She stepped into the utility room, closed the door, and answered. "This is Nurse Kim. We have your mother. She was brought in about an hour ago. She collapsed at home. We're still running tests, but we need you to come in." Elena pressed her hand against the wall. "Is she? She's stable for now. But you should come." She hung up. She stood in the utility room for exactly 30 seconds, her hand still on the wall, her eyes on nothing. She was doing the thing she had trained herself to do in emergencies: stay level, think clearly, move. She had to get to Incheon. It was 45 minutes by bus, longer in the morning traffic. She didn't have a car. The bus ran from the bottom of the hill, but she'd have to walk down first, and she opened the utility room door. Jiwoo was standing in the corridor, headed toward his study, tablet in hand. He looked at her. She looked like someone had just pulled the floor out from under her, but was refusing to fall. "What happened?" he said. She shook her head. "Nothing. I need to speak to Mrs. Park about taking the rest of the day." "What happened?" he said again. Same voice, but something in it had changed. She looked at him for a moment. "My mother was taken to Incheon General. I need to go." He put the tablet under his arm. "I'll take you." "That's not. My car will be faster than the bus." He said it like logistics, not generosity. "Already moving. Come." She sat in the back of the black car and watched Seoul move past the window and tried not to think too much. Jiwoo sat across from her, working on his tablet. He didn't try to make conversation. He didn't ask questions. But at one point, without looking up, he said, "She'll be all right." It wasn't a promise. He couldn't know that. But the way he said it, quietly and without fuss, landed somewhere. "You don't know that," she said. "No," he agreed. "But I've found it helps to say it anyway." She looked at the side of his face. He didn't look up from the tablet. She turned back to the window. The hospital was exactly as she'd feared. Fluorescent lights, that particular antiseptic smell, the sound of machines, the controlled urgency of nurses moving fast. Elena walked in and went straight to the desk. Within 20 minutes, she was in the room with her mother, a small woman, smaller than she remembered somehow, lying in a bed with monitors on both sides of her. Her mother opened her eyes when she heard Elena's footsteps. "Anak," she said, the Filipino word for child. "You came fast." "Of course I came." Elena sat in the chair beside the bed and took her mother's hand. "You scared me." "I'm fine. The nurses are making a big thing." Her mother's eyes moved to the door. "Who is that?" Elena turned. Jiwoo was standing in the doorway, one hand in his pocket, watching quietly. He had walked in with her, and she had somehow not registered until now that he was still here. "That's my employer," Elena said. Her mother looked at him, then at Elena, then back at him, with the particular sharpness of a woman who had raised a daughter alone and knew how to read a room. "Come in," her mother said to Jiwoo. He came in. Her mother held out her hand. He shook it carefully, like he understood fragile things. "Take care of my daughter," her mother said. It was not a request. Jiwoo looked at her for a moment. "Yes," he said. Elena stayed at the hospital for 6 hours. Jiwoo waited. Not in the waiting room. He had calls, meetings, a building full of people who needed decisions made. He handled all of it by phone in the hospital corridor, one foot crossed over the other, jacket folded over his arm. When Elena came out, she looked tired in a deep way. Not just the surface tiredness of a long day, the kind that goes all the way down. "How is she?" he asked. "Stable." It was her blood pressure. "They're going to run more tests tomorrow." She stopped in the middle of the corridor. "Why are you still here?" He looked at her. "You needed a ride back. You could have sent the car." "Yes." She waited for him to say something else. He didn't. She shook her head slowly and started walking toward the exit. He walked beside her. In the car, she fell asleep. He noticed it about 15 minutes into the drive, her head tipped to the side, her breathing slowing, her hands loosening in her lap. He told the driver to take the long way. He didn't look at her. He looked out the window at Seoul moving past in the dark, at the city he had spent 15 years building something in, and he thought about his file on her, and the children's clinic, and the complaint she had filed before anyone else had noticed. And then he thought about what she had said in the kitchen. She's learned not to bring you things she thinks you won't prioritize. He was at Hannah's school on Thursday. He arrived 10 minutes before the event started, wearing a suit that was slightly less severe than usual, and found Hannah in the crowd of students by the entrance. She saw him and stopped completely. Her face went through several things in very quick succession: disbelief, and then a careful, guarded hope, and then something that broke open. "Uncle Jiwoo, I heard you were showing your work," he said. "I wanted to see it." Hannah stared at him. "How did you?" She stopped. "Elena told you." "She told me," he said. "She didn't ask me to come. That was my decision." Hannah looked at him for a long, assessing moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. He let her. Her artwork was the best in the room. He stood in front of her drawings for a long time. The buildings that looked tender, the faces, the gardens, and he felt something shift deep inside his chest, slow and irreversible. On one of the drawings in the corner, she had written a title: Home. It was the mansion. He recognized the gate, the garden, the stone bench by the old fountain. But in the drawing, the fountain was on. The thing Jiwoo found out 2 weeks later came from an unexpected direction. He was in a meeting with his foundation board, the charitable arm of Shin Group, which had been funding medical facilities across Korea for 5 years, when one of the board members mentioned a proposal that had been sitting in their submissions folder for months. "There's one here from a nurse. For a children's clinic in Incheon. She's been trying to get it funded for almost a year." Jiwoo looked up from his papers. The name? Elena Reyes. The room went very quiet, though no one else understood why. "Pull the proposal," Jiwoo said. He read it that evening, alone in the study. It was 47 pages. Not the glossy, overly designed kind of proposal that his foundation usually received, the kind made by agencies who knew how to package charity. This was plain document formatting, dense with research and data, the kind of writing that a person does at midnight at a kitchen table because they have too much to say and not enough hours. She had documented every patient the original clinic had seen in its last year. Every child. Names changed for privacy, but ages, conditions, outcomes, all there. She had cross-referenced the gap in services since the clinic closed with admission rates at the nearest hospital. She had identified that 12 children had been admitted with conditions that would have been caught earlier if the clinic had still been open. 12 children. She had found funding projections, staffing models, a lease for space in Incheon she had apparently already negotiated in contingency. She had been building this whole time, while she was cleaning floors, while she was sending half her pay to her mother, while she was making rice porridge for a 12-year-old girl who didn't have anyone to cook for her. She had been building. Jiwoo put the proposal down. He sat in his study for a long time, the city glittering outside his glass wall. Then he picked up his phone and called Director Kwon. "I need you to find Elena." She was in the kitchen when he came to find her the next morning. Not cleaning. She was on her break, eating a small container of rice she had brought from home, reading something on her phone. She looked up when he walked in. He sat down across from her. That surprised her. He had never sat in the kitchen before. It was the staff kitchen, not the beautiful main one, the back one, with the fluorescent light that flickered slightly, and the old wooden table. He slid the proposal across the table to her.
She looked at it.
She looked at him. "How did you get that?" "It was submitted to my foundation." Her expression went through several things. "I didn't know it was your foundation." "I know." She looked at the proposal. "It's been sitting there for months." "Yes," he said. "That was a failure on our part." She looked at him directly. "What are you doing with it now?" He held her gaze. "I want to fund it." Elena put down her fork very carefully. "Mr. Shin. The full proposal. The space you've already negotiated, the staffing model, the equipment list. Full funding, ongoing, through the foundation." She was quiet for a moment. Why? It was the right question. He had expected it. "Because it's a good proposal," he said. "And because 12 children ended up in the hospital with conditions that should have been caught earlier." And because someone has been carrying this project alone for a year while working two other things simultaneously, and that's not something I can ignore once I know about it. Elena looked at him for a long time. You read all 47 pages, she said. Not a question. Yes. Something moved across her face. Not quite tears, just the expression of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has just been offered the possibility of setting it down. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. He stood. Mr. Shin.
He stopped.
She was looking at him steadily. You don't have to do this because you feel like you owe me something. From the watch. Or from the hospital. I know, he said. I mean it. So do I. He met her eyes. I'm doing it because it's right. Those are different things. He walked out. She said yes 3 days later. She knocked on his study door. The first time she had ever done that, and when he said come in, she opened it and stepped inside and stood on the other side of his enormous desk. I accept, she said. On 3 conditions. He gestured for her to sit. She sat. 1. The clinic is independent. Your foundation funds it, but I run it. No board interference in clinical decisions. Agreed. 2. The staff are hired on fair wages, not charity rates. Agreed. 3. She hesitated. 3, he said, waiting. I finish out the month here. The staff are short-handed. I'm not going to leave Mrs. Park with a gap. He looked at her. You're negotiating your own departure terms, he said. To protect my staff. Your staff are people, she said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment, and then something happened on his face that very few people had ever seen. He smiled. It was small, a little crooked, and it changed everything about how he looked, or maybe it just showed what had been there all along, under all that controlled, precise, expensive exterior. Agreed, he said. To all 3. On her last day at the mansion, Elena went to the garden. She stood by the old stone fountain and looked at it. It was dry, of course. Had been for years. She heard footsteps on the path. Hannah sat down beside her on the bench, notebook in her lap. I drew you, Hannah said, and turned the notebook to show her. It was Elena sitting at the bench. Careful, tender, specific. She had gotten the way Elena held her shoulders right, slightly forward, not in defeat, just in attention. Hannah, Elena said, this is incredible. Uncle Jiwoo said, he's going to put it in the study. Elena looked at her. He said that. He said it this morning. Hannah shrugged. He also said, she stopped, like she was deciding whether to say it. What? He said you made him see in between things again. The garden was quiet. Elena looked at the fountain. She heard something then, a low mechanical hum, coming from somewhere below the stone. And then, slowly, the fountain came on. Water, thin at first, then stronger, catching the light. Hannah grabbed her arm. He turned it on. He actually turned it on. Elena looked back toward the house. Jiwoo was standing at the garden door, jacket off, hands in his pockets, watching them. When he saw her look, he didn't wave. He didn't smile, well, not visibly. But he held her gaze for a moment, and in that moment something passed between them that needed no words. She turned back to the fountain. The water caught the afternoon light and threw it in small pieces across the stone. The clinic opened on a Tuesday. Small building in Incheon, close to the apartment blocks, close to the bus lines so families could get there. Clean white walls. Real equipment. 3 nurses and 1 pediatric doctor. All paid properly. On the wall of the waiting room, framed, there was a drawing of the clinic building, slightly stylized, the way a 12-year-old sees buildings, with light coming out of every window. Hannah had drawn it. Elena stood at the reception desk on the first morning, in scrubs again, the blue ones, the ones that actually fit who she was, and watched the first patients come through the door. A mother with a toddler. An elderly man with a folder of medical forms. A teenage boy who had been putting off a checkup for 2 months because the bus fare to the hospital was too much. She checked them in one by one. Jiwoo came at noon. He parked the car himself, no driver today, and walked in through the front door and looked around the waiting room. At the chairs that were starting to fill. At Elena's drawing on the wall. At the sound of a child laughing from somewhere in the back. Elena came out of one of the exam rooms and saw him. You didn't have to come, she said.
I know, he said.
Same exchange, reversed. She understood he had not come for the clinic. She understood he had come for her. Hannah's drawing looks good on the wall, she said. She'll be pleased to hear that. He looked at Elena. She misses you, by the way. She wants to know if you'll come for dinner. This Friday? Any Friday, he said. All of them if you want. The waiting room hummed quietly around them. Outside, Incheon was doing what it always did, going on, going forward, full of ordinary people carrying ordinary lives. Elena looked at the man standing in her clinic doorway, the powerful man who had accused her of stealing and then admitted he was wrong. The man who had waited 6 hours in a hospital corridor, who had read 47 pages, who had turned a fountain back on. All of them sounds like a lot, she said. It is, he agreed. I'm told I need to get better at in-between things. She looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled. Friday, she said. I'll be there. Some people come into your life like a storm. And some people come in quietly, cleaning the floors, carrying the weight. And they change everything, not by force, but by being exactly who they are. Even when no one is watching. Even when no one knows.